The Aorus 15 gaming laptop is on the smaller side for a 15-inch laptop with some nice specs inside. In this review, we'll take a look at performance, thermals, overclocking, battery life, and basically everything else you'd want to know to help you decide if it's a laptop you should consider. Starting with the specs, my unit has an Intel i7-8750H CPU, NVIDIA RTX 2060 graphics, 16GB of memory running in dual channel, a 15.6-inch 1080p 144Hz IPS screen, and a 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD. It's also got Gigabit Ethernet, 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 5. I've got the W9 configuration here. However, the X9 version is also available with RTX 2070 graphics if you're after more power. The laptop has a matte black metallic body both on the exterior and interior, and there are no sharp corners or edges anywhere. The dimensions of the laptop are 36.1cm in width, 24.6cm in depth, and about 2.4cm in height. So it's on the smaller side for a 15-inch laptop without being unnecessarily thin. The weight of the laptop is listed at around 2.4 kilos or 5.3 pounds, and mine came in at 2.2 kilos, or 2.8 kilos with a 180-watt power brick and cable for charging included. The 15.6-inch 1080p 144Hz screen does not have G-Sync. The bezels are also quite thin, around 8mm based on my own measurements. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test color gamuts, contrast, or brightness, as the laptop failed to recognize my Spider 5. I couldn't get it working using all three USB Type-A ports, or even the Type-C port with an adapter. Looking up the stats for the model though, it's apparently got 95% of sRGB, a 294 nit brightness, and 920:1 contrast ratio. However, I cannot confirm this. Just visually to my eye though, it looked alright. No obvious problems. I've taken a long exposure photo in a dark room as a worst case backlight bleed test, and there was only a small amount of imperfections found. I had trouble seeing them with my own eyes, but this will vary between laptops and panels. There was some screen flex, as the lid is on the thinner side and the hinge is in the center, but overall it felt fairly sturdy when opening. I was just able to open the laptop with one finger. The hinge wasn't too stiff, so this seems to show that there's more weight towards the back. In any case, I could use it on my lap perfectly stable. Despite the thin bezel, the camera is found above the display in the center. Unfortunately, the camera is one of the worst I've tested. The microphone isn't great either, and some of its own fan noise is picked up at idle. The keyboard has 3 zones of RGB backlighting, which can be controlled through the included Aorus Control Center software. There are 4 different effects, and the brightness can be adjusted between 2 levels or turned off if you prefer. The software can also be used to change the lighting found on the front left and right corners, although you've only got the option of red, green, blue, or off for these. The keyboard was good to type with, although I did find the smaller arrow keys annoying when I needed to use them. I personally would have preferred larger arrow keys given there is space available. Here's how typing sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. There's also a dedicated fan button on the top right, which I really liked. Usually with other Gigabyte or Aorus laptops, you need to hold function key and press the fan boost button together, and it usually requires the Control Center software to be installed for it to work. With the Aorus 15 though, this button is just a single press and works anytime, so you can easily max out the fan anytime with one button. There was only a little keyboard flex while pushing down hard. Overall it was fairly solid and there were no issues under normal use. The touchpad was smooth to the touch and uses precision drivers. It clicks down when pushed and has the usual Windows gestures available. It's a bit wider than what I'm used to, but it worked well, and despite the extra width, I never found it to get in the way when I needed to use the keyboard. Fingerprints show up on the matte black surface, but as it's smooth, they're easy to clean off. On the left, there's an air exhaust vent, Gigabit Ethernet port, USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type-A port, microSD card slot, and status LEDs. On the right, there's a 3.5mm audio combo jack, 2 more USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type-A ports, and another air exhaust vent. On the back, there are 2 more air exhausts towards the corners. Then from left to right, we've got the power input, HDMI 2.0 port, mini DisplayPort 1.3 output, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port, which also has DisplayPort 1.3 support, although no Thunderbolt, and then Kensington lock. On the lid in the center, there's the Aorus logo, as well as 2 lines, and these light up white. The color can't be customized, as this is just using the backlight from the screen. Underneath, there's heaps of ventilation holes to assist airflow. The two speakers are found towards the front, left and right corners and face down. They sounded alright for a laptop, clear at higher volumes but not really any bass. The bottom panel can be removed easily by taking out 11 screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Once inside, from left to right, we get access to the single 2.5-inch drive bay, Wi-Fi card, battery, 2 memory slots, and 2 M.2 slots, both of which support NVMe and SATA. Powering the laptop is a 62 watt-hour battery, and with a full charge and just watching YouTube videos with the screen on half brightness, keyboard lighting off, and background apps disabled, I was able to use it for just 1 hour and 48 minutes. This lower result was caused by the RTX 2060 graphics being in use the entire time. You don't have the option of using the Intel integrated graphics here. Usually we see this with laptops that have G-Sync. However, there's no G-Sync with the Aorus 15, so I'm not sure why this was chosen over NVIDIA Optimus. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and NVIDIA's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for 1 hour and 4 minutes all up. However, with 20% charge left, the frame rate dropped to 5 FPS and was no longer playable, and that was about 50 minutes in. I'll also note that I never saw the battery discharge while the 180 watt power brick was plugged in. Now for the thermal testing. On the bottom of the laptop, we can see we've got quite a large air intake vent, which is great to see. The rubber feet also seem to be angled such that they block the hot air being exhausted from coming straight back into the fans, so air should only be pulled in from the front. There are also quite a few heat pipes here, and some are shared between the processor and graphics, so a change in one component will affect the other. For instance, if the CPU gets hot, the graphics will be affected as a result. I'll also briefly talk about Gigabyte's new AI feature that comes with their new RTX laptops. There are 2 modes, AI Edge and AI Cloud. AI Edge processes data locally to make the best decisions in terms of what to change, like fan speeds, power limits, and clock speeds. While the AI Cloud setting will send data to Microsoft and get the best settings for the workload based on other user-submitted data, so I'm expecting it to perform better. Otherwise, all other tests had AI disabled unless stated otherwise. The thermal testing was completed with an ambient room temperature of 24 degrees Celsius. There's a lot of data here. CPU temperatures are shown by the blue bars, and GPU temperatures are shown by the green bars. The gaming tests towards the bottom were tested by playing Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good amount of combined processor and graphics resources, while the stress tests were tested by running the AIDA64 stress test and the Heaven benchmark at the same time, in order to attempt to fully load the system. At idle, the temperatures are a little warm at the bottom of the graph. However, the fans were basically silent. The temperatures aren't too hot in gaming once you increase the fan speed or undervolt the CPU. I'm using a minus 0.15 volt undervolt on the CPU, as denoted by UV on the graph, while the overclock, listed by OC, was a plus 150 MHz to the GPU core. In this case, I also wasn't seeing much of a difference between gaming at stock or with the AI features. At the top of the graph, once I started using a cooling pad, I saw some fairly big improvements to temperatures. It seems to be making a larger difference because of the big opening on the bottom of the laptop which assists with airflow. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. Overall, the results were pretty good. While there was CPU throttling without the undervolt, the clock speeds aren't too low even while under stress test. With the stress tests running and laptop at stock, there was both thermal and power limit throttling. As we saw in the last graph, this test got the CPU to the hottest point of 96 degrees Celsius. However, the thermal throttling could be removed by maxing out the fan. The default 52 watt TDP was now being hit, resulting in power limit throttling. However, as we can see, with the undervolt applied, we're able to get the full 3.9 GHz all-core turbo speed of the i7-8750H, even in this worst case scenario. Impressive stuff. It was also possible to boost the power limit up to 62 watts manually with Intel XTU. However, that would have also raised the temperatures, so I didn't take that route and instead stuck with undervolting. These are the clock speeds I got while just running CPU-only stress tests without any GPU load. Despite there being less load on the system as the graphics are not contributing heat into the system or drawing as much power as before, the clock speeds are about the same as with the CPU and GPU stress test running. With the undervolt applied, it was possible to get the full performance from this test and remove power limit throttling. These are the temperatures from these CPU-only tests. With the undervolt, the temperature dropped by 5 degrees Celsius, while also giving us better performance. To demonstrate how this translates into performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks here. There's basically no difference in single core, as that's not enough to trigger throttling. However, in the multi-core test, we can see a nice improvement once undervolting the CPU, as this helps alleviate the power limit throttling. Again, I could have boosted the TDP limit to achieve this, but then it would have run hotter. Here are the GPU-only clock speeds while under a graphical-only stress test, as well as the improvements seen by applying a 150 MHz overclock to the core with MSI Afterburner. The overclock resulted in a small temperature change of 1 degree Celsius, although there was power limit throttling in both tests. We'll see how this affected performance later. As for the external temperatures where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle it got to the mid-30s in the center, about average. While gaming it was in the low 40s, while the WASD keys were quite cool comparatively, then slightly cooler under stress tests. While gaming on battery power, the wrist rest area got hotter than before, with the hotspot on the left exactly where the battery is located. As for the fan noise produced by the laptop, I'll let you have a listen to some of these tests. At idle, it was almost completely silent. While gaming or under stress test with the fans on default speeds, it was fairly loud. Above average when compared to many other laptops with fans on max speed. When you manually boost the fans though, it gets very loud. Both fans spin up to 7200 RPM. But as we've seen before, this can improve the cooling a fair bit, so it's nice to have as an option. The Aorus Control Center software has some options to help improve performance easily too, without the need for other third-party tools. For instance, by setting the graphics to 1, we get a 100 MHz boost to the GPU core and a 160 MHz boost to the GPU memory, while the different settings for the CPU will adjust the power limit. No undervolting appears to happen. However, the default CPU TDP was 52 watts on the third setting, which is where I've done all of my upcoming game testing. By setting it to the highest setting, it gets boosted to 57 watts. Setting it to 2 puts the CPU TDP to 45 watts, as per the Intel spec for the 8750H. While 1 lowers this further to 38 watts, and 0 drops it all the way to 30 watts. So less performance, but could be worth changing when on battery power to make it last longer. While the gaming performance seems pretty good, as we'll see soon, there was some current limit throttling in some of the CPU heavy games, not something I usually see. I think this points to the 180 watt power brick not being adequate enough, at least in some of the more CPU heavy games. We can see an example here. While just driving around in Watch Dogs 2, the TDP dips to 25 watts at times, which results in a dip to frame rate. And this seems to be why some of the games in my gaming tests have lower 1% low results than expected. Despite this, all games still played well without noticeable problems. Just something to take note of for the upcoming benchmarks. Overall, the temperatures seemed reasonable. Still a little warm on the CPU at times though, considering how much of an opening we've got down the bottom and how loud the fans can get. However, the clock speeds were higher than many other laptops I've tested. The large opening was also beneficial when using a cooling pad, and undervolting helped improve the temperatures nicely too. The current limit throttling in some CPU heavy games was a bit strange. I would have thought the 180 watt brick would be enough. Given the other 2060 laptop I've tested with had the same i7 CPU and 180 watt power brick, and I didn't see these issues there. Although the Aorus 15 is getting higher clock speeds, so it may just need more power for those higher results. Unfortunately, I don't have any other larger bricks at the moment to test with to rule the issue out. Finally, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. I've tested these games with these NVIDIA drivers and all available Windows updates to date installed. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode and not in multiplayer mode, as it's easier to consistently reproduce the test run. The purple bars show the results with ray tracing disabled, and the performance is decent there. Even at ultra settings, I found it playable with an 80 FPS average. The green bars show ray tracing enabled, and it was only really playable at medium and low settings. But in my opinion, it both looked and ran better at ultra and RTX off. The red bars show ray tracing with DLSS enabled, and while the performance was improved compared to the green bars, the game just looked blurry. I wouldn't want to use it. Metro Exodus was tested using the built-in benchmark, which seems to perform worse than actual gameplay, making this more of a synthetic test than representative of actual gameplay. This is only the second time I've tested this, and it was performing a couple of FPS ahead of another RTX 2060 laptop I recently tested, the Clevo P960ED. Far Cry New Dawn was tested with the built-in benchmark as well, and again, second time I've tested this new game. Compared to the only other 2060 laptop I've tested, it was just a few FPS behind, but a fair bit lower in 1% low. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings on the lowest possible values, as there aren't really predefined setting presets in this game. Even with everything maxed out, it played well, around 90 FPS averages with 60 FPS 1% lows. However, results can change a bit based on where you are on the map and what other players are doing. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and even with epic settings, I was able to average above 100 FPS. Not surprising, as it's a well-optimized game that runs well on basically any modern hardware. It was a similar deal with Overwatch, which was tested playing in the practice range. The lower settings were able to hit the 300 FPS frame cap, and even maxed out at epic settings, we're still getting 150 FPS with high 1% low results. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results were quite good, just a little ahead of the other RTX 2060 laptop I've tested, with 100 FPS averages possible in this test at low settings or below. CSGO was tested using the Electrical FPS benchmark, and with all settings maxed, this test was only just below 200 FPS averages, with up to 250 possible with all settings on minimum. Rainbow Six Siege was behaving a little strangely. The average frame rates were excellent. I found this game to really benefit from the new NVIDIA Turing architecture. However, the 1% lows were quite behind, which isn't usually the case. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was another that was tested with the built-in benchmark, and it was also another where I saw strange results. In this case, I noted that the CPU TDP would drop to 25 watts in this particular test, which seems to be why at low settings it's almost 30 FPS lower compared to the other 2060 laptop I've covered. However, the Aorus 15 ends up being slightly faster at higher settings, which is likely what you'd be playing with anyway. Dota 2 was tested using a fairly intensive replay, so this should be a worst case scenario. These results are not the same as actually playing the game. I just use them as they can be exactly compared with my other tests. These are the results from actually playing a normal game in the middle lane, easily over 100 FPS even with ultra settings. Watch Dogs 2 also had some weird results, where high and very high settings were performing better than low and medium settings. As we saw before, there was current limit throttling in this game at times, which seems to be affecting results. My guess is that as the lower settings are more CPU bound, if there was an issue with CPU throttling, it would become less problematic at higher settings. Weirdness aside, the game was still very playable for me, even at Ultra. I've tested more games in the dedicated gaming benchmark video. Check the card in the top right corner if you want to see more results. The i7-8750H CPU, RTX 2060 graphics, and dual-channel memory are giving us impressive results in most of the games tested, even at max settings. The Aorus 15 is also available with RTX 2070 graphics as well, so expect even better performance there. As noted throughout the games tested, the 1% low results of some more CPU-demanding games seemed a bit lower than I expected due to current limit throttling. Despite this, overall performance was good, and while playing games, I can't say I noticed any issues. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, Port Royal, and VRMark from 3DMark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. As we saw earlier, we've got the option of overclocking the graphics and undervolting the CPU to increase performance, so let's see how this actually helps in gaming. Far Cry 5 was retested using the built-in benchmark at 1080p with ultra settings. Down the bottom at stock with the fan at default or max, there was no real difference, as there wasn't thermal throttling here. With the AI enabled, there was a fair improvement to 1% low results, but only a small increase to average FPS. Finally at the top, with my custom manual settings, I was able to get the highest average FPS. So the AI settings did improve performance over stock, but if you know what you're doing, you can extract extra performance. I've used Crystal DiskMark to test the storage, and the 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD that was installed was getting some nice results. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test the microSD slot, as I only have regular sized SD cards. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. At the time of recording, in the US, the W9 version is going for under $1,800 US, or you can upgrade to the X9 with RTX 2070 graphics for $220 US more. The price doesn't seem too bad. When you consider something like the MSI GE63 with same specs appears to be $2,000 for the 2060 model. Meanwhile here in Australia, the Aorus 15 is going for around 3,100 Australian dollars. So what do you guys think about the Aorus 15 gaming laptop? Overall, I think it's checking a lot of boxes, but as always, nothing is perfect. It's well built, the chassis is on the smaller side for a 15-inch laptop, allowing it to have nice thin bezels, and it's got good specs which allow it to perform well in most games. As we saw before, it seems that some workloads may benefit from a larger power brick. The X9 version of the Aorus 15 with RTX 2060 graphics does upgrade the power brick to 230 watts, so there may be less of an issue there. It also seems like a strange move to not use the Intel integrated graphics outside of gaming. which, as we saw, resulted in lower battery life. I could understand this more if it had G-Sync, but that's not the case. I appreciated the large opening on the bottom. That's not too common, and it made it easy to improve airflow and thermals with a cooling pad. And with some simple tweaks, we were able to run it without the temperature being too hot, at least compared to many other laptops I've tested. There's not much else to complain about. The camera and microphone quality were pretty bad, though that's not too surprising given they've managed to fit it up the top in the thin screen bezel. Otherwise, I would have also liked some larger arrow keys. When it comes down to it, I think Gigabyte have an impressive machine here, and I'm interested to see what else comes out of the Aorus lineup in future. Let me know what you guys thought about the Aorus 15 gaming laptop down in the comments, and leave a like to let me know if you found the review useful. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for future tech videos like this one.